We joked yesterday, the most premium of media companies in the upfront are now promoting addressable light capabilities, which I hope we get into a little bit today. But, even the most premium program has to have now a data capture and a signal identifier, at least from a streaming standpoint, to say, hey, this show's great, but, Evan's watching or Marion's watching it, because you got to validate that.
Welcome back to the Media Odyssey Podcast. Reunited, that is Marion Ranchet.
That is Evan Shapiro.
And we've got a great episode back from vacation. How was your vacation?
Amazing. How are yours?
Too good.
Too good. Yeah.
So lots of pasta, lots of wine, lots of balsamic vinegar. So we got a great episode today. We want to talk about what ads are important, which ads really are effective and which aren't, transparency and data on connected television and the advertising ecosystem. And we've got a great guest from Spectrum Reach, Dan Callahan, who is the head of national sales for them. And we're going to talk about addressable advertising and what that means and why it differentiates itself. So a lot has happened since we were apart. The upfronts all happened since we were together last. Any reactions you had from the upfronts this past week?
So I think the biggest one would be for me actually the fact that Roku didn't show up. They went the silent way, right? So I've seen YouTube and is it Neil, the CEO?
Neil
You
Mohan,
know,
yeah.
yeah, he was like all of this with the creators and the whole thing, and apparently they put together an amazing event. And I've seen news here
Yeah,
and
Lady
there.
Gaga played for 20 minutes.
Yeah, but the thing is, I'll go for the silent, right? So those who weren't there, I think it does signal, a few changes going on, right?
What do you think? Yeah, because you're a Roku whisperer. What do you think that meant?
I haven't spoken to anyone, but I think it's a matter of being focused, getting stuff done. I think there's a lot of whoopla about treating people and maybe they didn't have much to tell. Could be the other angle. At the same
What I
time,
heard, what I heard was that they instead, I think it was a saving measure, to be blunt. And I don't have firsthand. I know
yeah,
Charlie Collier, who runs Roku Media there, but he and I have not talked about this.
yeah,
My understanding from a couple people was that it was really a cost saving measure, and that they
yeah,
went very small, agency by agency, dinner by dinner,
yeah.
as opposed to doing a big, expensive, $1 million event.
That looks more like them, honestly.
Yeah,
If you look at
that's more
Roku,
Anthony Wood.
well, yeah, exactly. You've said it, right? So yeah, I think a bit of that, and there's a lot going on. And actually, interestingly enough, they made a very different move, one that I did not expect by buying, Friendly.
What do you think about
So
that?
yeah, I'm gonna write about this in more detail because I wonder. I see where they're going with this. I think it makes no sense to do it themselves. And I think it speaks to something that we talk about a lot. That is that, it's all nice and beautiful to be in streaming right now. But, in terms of scale, engagement, what's happening in, cable, MVPDs, I think it is crucial. I see it myself. Some of the companies I work with, they are seeing great numbers on advertising from distribution outside of CTV. So I think that's a move from them to dip their toes in the two worlds. Let's see.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And I've heard generally good reaction to that acquisition around the rest of the industry. Everybody seems to think it was a
Some people say, duh. Like, what? Why? I've seen a bit
yeah,
of
yeah.
that, but
I
anyway.
haven't seen that much, but you're a little bit more tuned into that community than I am.
So how
I
about you?
also thought
Tell me
go
about
ahead.
the upfronts, right? Because you were right in the midst of it, remotely though. But so what's your take?
What was
What came out?
fascinating was, so I had spies at each upfront, and they were kind of live texting me as they were happening. And to me, what was very interesting is how much each one of the presentations they shared. So
Okay.
Everybody but one mentioned had the NFL on stage with them, right?
Oh, wow.
Every single one, NBC, Disney, Fox, Amazon, YouTube, all had the NFL, right?
Yeah.
At Netflix, all had the NFL. And so to me, there's a kind of creeping monoculture there that is pretty dangerous for the
Yeah.
advertising economy. I think that's an interesting
Super interesting.
aspect. And then on the other side, everybody used these buzzwords, full funnel. Everybody's full funnel now. Everybody's
Mm,
full funnel, all the blah, blah,
mm.
blah. And again, it's
Omni-channel,
like
full funnel. Yeah.
it loses its meaning to a
Yeah.
certain extent because nobody really explained necessarily what that meant
Yeah.
and how that transpires or how that will transact. And what's the data transparency
Mm.
before, during, and after a campaign. And then to me, the most important announcement during the upfront had nothing to do with programming. It had to
Yeah.
do with YouTube. They announced two major things as part of their new ad stack, which is these peak moments. Did you see
Yeah.
that?
No, I did not
So,
see that.
so they have this thing where they're gonna use Gemini AI to determine
Okay.
the peak emotional and engagement moments of every video, and then use the AI to insert your ad
Oh,
right
wow.
immediately after that peak point. That is to me a game changer.
Yeah,
All of
that's
television
fascinating.
should be doing that.
Yeah.
And then the other was really pushing their shoppable,
Yeah.
send to phone, purchase within the CTV environment offering. Again, I don't see anybody else, not
Mm.
even Amazon really spoke that much about that during their upfront. So to me, those are elements that are now table stakes. I wrote a piece on my Substack Media War and Peace, which you can subscribe to right now. I'll wait.
25%
Um,
off, right?
yeah, right, exactly. 25% off for all new
That's a
subscribers
peak
right now.
moment, YouTube. That's a peak
That
moment.
is a peak moment, right. Very nice, Marion. I wrote a piece about, iSpot did this survey of about 250, 260 marketers, and they asked them what their big priorities were right now. And number one, over 50% was outcomes.
Yeah.
And number two was value, and everything else,
Mm.
paled by comparison. So to me, when outcomes are the number one priority for every single buyer, the full stack data, the amount of data you're providing on the front end to target most likely buyers, the data you're providing during the campaign to adjust while it's running, and the post data analysis, which enables you to determine what kinds of transactions transpire due to your campaign, to me, that is the holy grail of advertising right
Yeah.
now.
Nice. So moving on, because this is done. What's coming next, right? Because there was a lot of
The deal making. Now
showing
now all the
off.
presentations happen,
Yeah.
and now the deals hopefully get made.
So deals are being done. Today we're going to talk about what? What are we talking about today? Are we talking
But
about
so
TV versus digital? Are we talking
Well, so
about
you and I
CTV,
had a debate.
FLT?
You and I had a debate a couple weeks ago, where we were talking about what television is now,
Yeah.
the difference between social and television, the effectiveness of sight, sound, and
Yeah.
motion on the big screen versus social video and YouTube. And you said that you had this. You were basing this on a study that you had read, but you were talking about how social video campaigns are actually decreasing in effectiveness on a per campaign
Yeah.
basis. And that seems, I did a little research, in your absence and found that study. And you're right. People are pulling money away from pure social campaigns and putting them more and more into retail media
Yeah.
and bigger CTV campaigns as well. But again, I feel like if retail media is going to be the center of a lot of people's focus in the buying community, that only reinforces the need for high quality data before,
Yeah.
during, and after the campaign. And the people who can provide that are going to the ones who are going to win the biggest deals, the biggest increases in budgets and CPMs year on year.
Why do you think that is? That potentially social media is not performing on par with what we've seen historically. Is it that because there's the question of attention, right? And we're going to talk about, are all views equal, all ads equal? Is it a question of attention? Is it that there's like so much on digital that ultimately it's a lot of noise, And that effectiveness that we saw at the beginning is getting drowned, right? Because that's kind of the business case that TV makes, right? In that debate, TV versus digital, what TV says is, we're building brands where we have a longer attention span. Uh, it's also about creating an emotional, connection. All of those things ultimately feed into TV also being, performance. But the only problem is that it's harder to
Measure
qualify,
the
right?
performance.
To
Yeah, that's
measure. Yeah,
exactly right.
exactly. So what's your take on that?
I think what's interesting is same survey by iSpot. Buyers don't really consider fraud all that much when they're making purchases of media,
That
and
feels
yet,
insane.
say again,
That feels insane,
it does feel
especially
insane,
when
especially
budgets are
when
tightening, right? I don't
yeah,
get it.
and I think that's catching up to social video
Yeah,
is, if you listen to Augustine Fowl, who's a great analyst in this area, he believes that as much as 50 to 60% of all impressions on social are fraud. And people have ignored that because there still is a return on investment. You can
yeah,
spend $1, get $1.25 back. And you can measure it. You can measure that effectiveness. But still, if half of the impressions being served on social are fraud, holy cow, think about the amount of waste that is. And then when you look at CTV, Statista did a study and some research around this, and they're showing that in 2023, it was around 16% of all impressions served on CTV were fraud,
yeah.
about $88 billion. That means this year it'll be over $90 billion in bot watched ads on CTV, and that's going to grow to 175 billion by the end of this decade, 22% of all ads. 1 in 5
Yeah.
ad impressions served on CTV are being watched by a bot. And so
That's
to me,
worrying.
that's part of the reason why people are pulling out of social is that
Yeah.
fraud is beginning to catch up.
But so about CTV, I find those numbers staggering, honestly. And what's very worrying is that we've always said, right, that eyeballs are going to CTV faster than ad dollars. But if you're saying
Right.
that, even that the little money that goes to CTV, it's still a small portion of total advertising in the US. That even a big portion of that is fraud. That's insane. The question is who's trying to tackle that, right? Because if you look at CTV, it's not the only issue they have. They have trouble proving the business case, right? Are they bringing, incremental reach? You speak a lot about measurement. The same thing. It's just a bunch of walled gardens, right? I honestly I wouldn't want to be an ad buyer and media planner in today's world.
No, I think it's a really difficult thing because there was I wrote this piece this past week about how the buyers are really, really unhappy with the lack of transparency
Yeah,
in the specifically in the CTV world. They feel like a lot of the middle people, I won't say
yeah,
middlemen, but the middle people are really just adding cost, but they're not adding any transparency. They're not adding any accuracy. They're not adding any real value, and it's just
yeah,
inflating the costs of the purchases, and at the same time, really obfuscating what the outcomes and what the results of these campaigns are. And it's something we've talked about a lot is the
yeah.
lack of high quality data available on CTV, especially when you look at things like FAST and AVOD.
Yeah, well, it's hurting Fast and AVOD stakeholders a lot because if you look at what it costs to run a fast channel today, a lot of folks are saying it's the ad tech tax. And everyone is trying
Right.
to understand, all of those little, cents here and there. And that's actually a lot of money. And when you're a channel owner and you're trying to invest in that new model, but on the other side, you still have a lot of fixed costs. That's content, that's your people, that's just the tech delivery. It's really making the equation tricky. It's great that advertisers and agency are complaining because because honestly, my side of the world, we have no say. I've seen a few folks trying to fight against that, But if the agency and the advertisers are saying enough is enough and are cutting these middle people or are pushing for transparency and reduce costs, honestly, and it's a question of, show us what you do, be paid fair value for what you do.
Yeah, and that gets to, we're going to have a guest a little bit later, Dan Callahan from Spectrum Reach, and he and I were at an event yesterday, the Go Addressable event during the Upfront, where I unveiled this new map of the media universe, the addressable table of elements. Looks like the period you called me Breaking Bad.
Yeah, you went Breaking Bad on us,
I
100%.
went total Walter White on you.
Yeah.
Even though I failed, I literally failed chemistry in high
Oh,
school.
I did too. I
I'm
did.
not good at that. But we made it look like the periodic table of elements, and there was really no judgment on the table. It was really
Yeah.
an outlay of the addressable universe. But addressable advertising, which you asked me this before we got started, like not everybody understands
Yeah,
what
what
that
it is.
is.
Yeah.
This is, beyond contextual. This is beyond targeted. This is using what's called deterministic data over probabilistic data. And, when you look at the data ecosystem, there is this, you know, growing ecosystem of data vendors who are providing things like hashed emails and
Yeah.
IP addresses as a way to plan your media and put into a data clean room and compare it with your own first party data to create targeted campaigns
Yeah.
and measure the outcomes on the back end. But what we found out was that those are not reliable data.
Mm.
That think about this, in a multi-dwelling unit. I live in an apartment building. You live in an apartment building too?
No.
You live in
It's like a mini building of my own. You know
Okay.
those Amsterdam houses like this?
Okay, yeah, so a townhouse, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
But what's happening is so it's attached to other homes, right?
Yeah.
So what's happening in these multi-dwelling units, VPNs and other things are really just clouding the
Yeah.
the accuracy of the IP addresses attached to an address or to a consumer, to the point where vendors have an average of like 4 or 5 IP addresses per household. But when then you look at the ISP data, the people who are
Yeah.
actually providing the internet addresses, it's more like 1.5. So that
Yeah.
means as many as 2 or 3 are just fraudulent or misconstrued or just wholly inaccurate. And then you look at email addresses as a way to kind of create a data pool for contextual or addressable advertising. And think about this: how many old email addresses are associated with your
Mm.
name that you no longer use?
Yeah.
Your
I've
Roku
actually had
email
to
address.
Yeah, I've actually had to switch. My last name, then my name, because I've used up so many over the years.
Right,
Yeah.
or I'll create an email address just to sign up for something, and then I'll
Yeah.
never use that email
I
address
don't do that
again.
that often, I have to say, because I'm a password freak. It scares me. But
Oh, yeah,
no, I
well,
see what you mean. So that means that the numbers are inflated, not accurate, when actually what you want to know, well, you want to know more, right, about what's going on in a house. Just you don't
right.
just
You wanna
want to
know
know where they
the
are.
homeowners there, and
Yeah.
you can anonymize it and
Yeah.
create the privacy that you want, but the issue is that so much of the data that's being sold to create campaigns is just it's a lot of chaff. There's a lot
Yeah.
of
Yeah. Yeah.
garbage in it, and if you put garbage in, you're going to get garbage out.
Yeah.
Whereas if you look at the providers, the MVPDs as an example, so compare, let's say, Netflix or Disney Plus, where really pretty much all they have is an email address and a credit card.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, you look at, someone, a pay TV provider or a mobile provider, a telco, they have home address,
Yeah.
credit card. They have so much more, what I call actually not first party data, but zero party data.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I
And
like that.
that
I'm gonna steal that.
yeah, it is. It is, it's the consumer has provided it, and there's a direct relationship, billing relationship
Yeah.
connected to the actual household address. It just creates a much higher quality. It's deterministic. We know that this human being has these attributes to them, and there are this many human beings in the home, and so on and so forth, as opposed to email addresses or IP addresses.
So if I were to kind of dumb it down for non-Madison Avenue people, addressable, it's also a question of stakeholders. So you would say it's mostly folks within the MVPD world uh,
Primarily, yeah.
versus perhaps
No, I
connected
think
TV. Tel- Then
telcos as well.
MVPD's telcos, but by opposition with CTV platforms,
Pure
essentially.
CTV
Yeah.
platforms, yes.
Okay.
And then that's the other thing is like, not only do the premium SVODs have an issue with a lack of data transparency, but on the flip side, there's this huge churn that's out there as well. So, take up on ad tiers
Yeah.
is actually increasing dramatically. Antenna now says that around somewhere around 70% of
Yeah.
all SVOD signups in the last year went to ad tiers, which is
Which is
impressive.
really gonna hurt our poo. Initially, the idea
Well, we'll
was,
see. We'll see.
yeah,
Yeah,
we'll
we'll
see.
see.
I think it will, but
But on
because
the
I
flip
think,
side of that, the
yeah,
the churn of those ad tiers is 70% per year.
yeah,
That's a lot.
yeah, that's a lot.
If you're signing up 10 and you're losing 7 every single year, it's really hard to create a frequency campaign at an audience if the consumer is signing up for an SVOD, watching
Yes,
and binging a show, and then canceling before the next billing cycle,
yes,
which is, basically somewhere around 40% of all new signups
yeah.
are these serial churners, and that's an antenna term. It creates a
Yeah,
lot
and
of
the ISP, the pay TV, the telco, the mobile operator, I'd say these guys are like bank, right? When the utility is at the core of the subscription, it's hard, right? I'm getting called every week to make a switch, but I just can't be bothered, right? So,
it's hard to break
uh,
up with a
yeah,
utility
it's really
company.
hard. So you're right to say that these folks have a lot of data, and actually, I've been complaining, so to say, a bit about that part of the ecosystem, especially in Europe, because so I spent 8 years at Orange, so which is a French telco operating in multiple markets in Africa, etc. And to me, they sit on a pile of data and really gold, but because they're so big and slow, they're struggling to embrace and play on par with the CTV platforms, at least from a platform perspective and innovation perspective, when actually, to your point, they have the reach and they have more data. So I'll give you the example of the French market, who is one of the last market, as often, to get into addressable TV. They call it TV segmenté, so segmented TV. Like we needed another name, but this is what it is. The four telecom operators who are doing internet, mobile, and TV, so they're also pay TV operators, are coming together. They had a goal to have, let's say, perhaps 200 million euros within the last 2 years in terms of revenue, only at 50 million.
Hmm.
The spiel is appealing, right? They're saying, of course, we still command a lot of the linear viewership. A lot is still happening on set-top boxes versus CTV. Come with us. Instead of doing one to many in terms of your ads, you do one to one, right? So you have that personalization, etc. You can segment who you want to target, and it's cheaper, supposedly. And then you can go, it's like 5,000, right? Whereas you wouldn't get a traditional linear TV spot at that price. Now you fast forward to today, it is so heavy in the processes that it's not growing the way it should be. So the promise is there, but in terms of the execution, we still have to see what's going on.
Yeah, and I feel like it's the same way on the premium SVOD is that there's a promise there, right?
Yeah,
There's a promise of a premium sight, sound, motion
yeah,
environment, but on the other hand, there aren't that many impressions being served, and the churn is so substantial that that promise is not being realized either. And
yeah,
so the question is, which ads are actually most effective? Which ads carry more weight? Which ads are more equal than others? And that
yeah.
actually gives us a nice segue
Segue
to
into our
our
guest.
guest here. Dan Callahan, how are you?
Hey, Evan. How are you?
Good. Dan, you are the head of national sales at Spectrum Reach. Did I get that title right?
Yes, that's appropriate. Group vice president is what we call it, I think, operationally, but national sales
Yeah, too many
is the
words.
remit. Yeah, all these acronyms. GVP, I had to Google it when I started.
And we were at an event yesterday. So Marion and I were just talking about the quality of ads, the quality of data. You and I were at an event yesterday, the Go Addressable event, where we were talking about addressable advertising. And Marion and I actually were just defining what addressable advertising was. But you said something interesting yesterday, which was addressable advertising is not a what, but a how. Did I get that right?
Yeah, I quoted Ashley Arena. I repurposed that live on the spot. I thought it was very powerful, so wanted to work it back in the closing, so it was reiterated. But yes, absolutely right.
And what does that mean to you?
I mean, I think it's now like there was some demystification that's had to happen really over the last 3 or 4 years. And, I think Lisa Herdman leaned into that as well of there was an education, it was deemed expensive or challenging or really mundane from a process perspective, right? So it was an add-on, a sidecar, a test budget. So in that world, it was more of like a how, like how do we do this? And I would really say over the last year and some of the statistics we shared about the growth, it has become a what, right? Everybody's talking about it. Brands are asking for it. We joked yesterday, the most premium of media companies in the upfront are now promoting, addressable light capabilities, which I hope we get into a little bit today. But, even the most premium program has to have now a data capture and a signal identifier, at least from a streaming standpoint, to say, hey, this show's great, but, Evan's watching or Marion's watching it, because you got to validate that.
Let's back up a little
All
bit
right.
for a second. So what for our listeners, especially those who may not be in the United States, what is Spectrum Reach? What's your elevator pitch for Spectrum Reach as an entity?
My elevator pitch is Spectrum Reach is the nation's largest connectivity company. We sit at the center of the home. We provide high-speed internet, video subscription packages, and mobile phone services to 31 million customers across the country.
So your footprint's about to get larger. And then yesterday you made this point, and I'm going to let Marion jump in here in a second. But you made this point about how, and we were just discussing this, because I think social is seen as a performance vehicle. Because of the measurability of it and the data. But at the same time, these walled gardens are grading their own homework as far as the measurement goes. But you made the point yesterday, which I wrote down, that TV is becoming a performance vehicle. What does that mean, and how does that work from your perspective?
I think there's this old adage, and it was one of the first things taught to me in the business probably 20 years ago, right? It was sort of like TV works, or the John Wanamaker quote, right? Of like, I know some percentage of my media dollars is working, I just don't know which half. Fact of the matter is, you now know which half, right? Or which whole. So you're making smarter decisions that are rooted in data. You're measuring the efficiency or the efficacy of it. So right? The results are there. It is now measurable, and that is why TV is finally. I've said it for years, getting the credit it deserves. For years, we were kind of getting credit, but it was always looked at as a top of funnel branding, and now it's like, hang on a second. TV is driving awareness, but is also driving action.
And Marion was just talking about the MVPDs in her home country, France. But how do you hear? Well, she's her first home country. Now she has a second home country, the
Yeah.
Netherlands. But um, how do you treat data with your clients? So Spectrum, does a deal with a major national advertiser, and they're using your footprint to reach these consumers across the country. You've got all this data. You've got all these what I call zero-party data points from the consumer, and then you have all this performance data, this usage data that you're using. What's a deal? What's a handshake look like between a brand or an agency and Spectrum Reach when somebody comes in and says, we want to target the most likely buyer on the front end, we want to measure the campaign as it's running, and then we want to see the transactional results on the other end?
I mean, that's the dream scenario, right? Is that a buyer comes in with that exact remit and asks those questions. We're using our data and our subscriber footprint on the front end to plan, the media inventory available to us through our distribution agreements to run ads and target those homes that are within the brand's desired segment. And then again, able to tie back exposure to action, that outcomes driven here, piece of it, which closes the loop, right? So I think for us, end to end, it's a ideal scenario where our data helps in the planning process. We're doing first party data matches. We've got certain data synchronizations with certain brands and even certain agencies that is, um, more unique and intimate, and we're excited about it. We want to continue to build those bridges and partnerships with everybody.
Can I ask? So I have to say, addressable TV in the US it's a fairly recent concept to me. It's been in Europe for years. I think even before CTV was. When I look at the US market, my first thought goes to CTV. So what's your business case, so to say? How do you make it compelling to advertisers to invest within your ecosystem? What's your USP versus the CTV ecosystem?
Yeah, look, I think, Nielsen Gauge is grown in popularity. A lot of people use that as a North Star for what consumption looks like.
Yeah.
54% of that consumption is still traditional. I can't get my air quotes in the shot here. Traditional linear TV.
Yeah.
Um, and with our set top boxes and again our homes, that is becoming targetable. Addressable linear is a big part of what we do and what we deliver, and it's almost like this is the next iteration of the education of addressable traditional TV or linear set top box consumption versus addressable CTV. So, um, for us, we look at it. We love both sides of our footprint the same, the traditional piece and the streaming CTV piece. The capabilities are becoming more comparable, like for like, where we are running addressable in a set-top box home or a CTV home. A lot of our homes have both.
Okay.
But it's still a ton of time and a ton of viewership and a ton of ad-supported TV, right? Evan touched on that yesterday. We got to hammer that home. Ad-supported TV happening and still the traditional modality, if you will.
Yeah, and the homes who have MVPD relationships, that's their primary source of entertainment. They'll watch the SVOD, let's say 3, 4, 5 times a month, but they're watching the MVPD product every day.
Exactly right. For a lot of time too, I think we see on average it's 4.5 hours, right? So if you think about time spent with content via our connection, via our device, it's astronomical, right? Even some of those more, I hate to call it appointment based because it's really not appointment based anymore in the traditional day, date, and time sense. But when you're entering a subscription service to watch a show that you're into, you're either binging it or you're showing up for that hour and you're probably exiting thereafter.
And you had some you had Lisa Herdman from RPA, you had someone there from Dentsu, you had other clients on stage with you yesterday, and they seemed really educated in the addressable advertising milieu, if you will. And that's a French word, I think.
Stop
The
butchering the French. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, no, I've been practicing a little bit.
Yeah,
I
I
was in
know.
Italy, but
Stick to Italian.
um,
Stick to Italian.
ciao. But the how do you educate? I mean, there
Yeah.
does still seems to be a lot of mythology and wrong-headed thinking about what addressable is. How do you educate your clients?
Yeah.
And it seems to be working to a certain extent because you've doubled the number of orders you're getting for addressable advertising in the last couple of years. But what is the challenge to educating the agency or ultimately the client around this offering?
It's repetition, right? I think there's a broad sense now, and this was an undertone in the back of the room yesterday of addressable as a definition has almost become too broad, right? As you laid out in the periodic table of elements here, um, so many things can call themselves addressable, right? So I was teasing some folks in the back. It's like we got to go get a better name, get a more unique, higher targeted name, right? Like
Yeah.
everybody adds a plus to their streaming service. Maybe it's addressable plus, but um, it's it's deterministic, right? It's the education. I think here's the thought, right? Of like everybody kind of understands targeting. Everybody on the surface agrees to most of the extent of waste reduction. There are some brands out there like my buddy Vinny at Hershey where, they're looking for people with a mouth, so they're going to be all right. But, most brands budgets aren't growing. We know that. You got to be more targeted. You've got to be smarter with the way you're spending your money. So there is some waste that is going to happen. And now they're asking all the right questions. Okay, I can target, I can eliminate these types of things. I know I don't need to reach these people and I'd really like to reach these people. Great. Hold the phone. And now let's come back and let's re-educate or re-inform them of how the deterministic addressable set is differentiated and superior to, an IP or an email address or a modeled targeted piece of media that still gets to call itself addressable in today's landscape.
So, Dan, you brought this up, so I'm going to bring it up here. It's the addressable table of elements. And I made this in collaboration with Go Addressable, which Spectrum Reach is a significant and I think founding member of. What is Go Addressable? Why are you in a trade organization with a whole bunch of your competitors?
I mean, exactly what we were just talking about. Education, the rising tide of addressable lifts all of these boats. We are um, competitive, right? Frenemies, if we want to code ourselves that way, but we're all selling the same promise, in the Go Addressable footprint, in the ampersand footprint. We're not stepping on each other's toes in the current construct. So it's very complementary. And again, we're collectively trying to educate the marketplace on our comparable capabilities that include deterministic subscriber first party data or zero party data. I'm going to start using your term.
You
That's
can.
pretty cool.
That is yours to use.
Otherwise, how many people are we talking about? Households are we talking about
For
with the Go
charter
Addressable?
specific or for Go Addressable?
No, for yeah.
Oh man, Go Addressable. I think Dawn shared the number yesterday that it's upwards of 75 million. I've seen it published somewhere between 75 and even 91. Uh,
Yeah, on this chart it says 69.5, but yeah, I think you're right. It's probably over 70 at this point. So you're talking about 70 million households in the US, which is where we have zero party data, or you have zero party data, household level deterministic data, and that gets to a kind of another point there, which is we didn't. This lays out the entire addressable ecosystem from measurement to identity, from buy side to sell side, and it doesn't really take an opinion on the quality of the different vendors there, except in one area, which is on inventory. And that's on the left-hand side of this chart here, which it goes from deterministic or green down to least deterministic or probabilistic IP addresses. And we were talking about that, before you joined. But, to me, this kind of defines the differentiation between the Go Addressable trade members and the pure CTV streaming providers. The idea that you're going to have substantially more data on the way in, during the campaign, and afterwards. How do you position that in the marketplace?
I think we just talk about the intimate connection that it has created from being a trusted service provider. It's you're one of 5 or 6 companies, like you said, in that upper left quadrant. There's a number of choices. Some vary by where you live, but it is differentiated. The supply access we have, the targetability that comes along with it. And again, we're in that same boat, all rowing in the same direction.
How granular can you go?
We can go down to the household level. We are making some strides at trying to look at the devices and the device makeup of a home, but right now, we can confidently call it household level addressable.
So you know who's in the house? How many people potentially a bit on the demos, or
We know that certainly the demo and the makeup of the person on the bill. We've got some other data sets that we partner with to have a better understanding of who's in the home or what the let's call it the average Spectrum home looks like or is comprised of. So there's some modeling elements of that, but for the purposes of addressability, it is the name and the individual with the credit card and the mailing address and all that good stuff attached to them.
What I found fascinating about the event and the organization itself is in a week full of upfront presentations where everybody's fighting tooth and nail for every dollar and every moment of attention, you've got these massive organizations who are competing for dollars, um, collaborating and cooperating around data, around messaging, around a USP. Why?
I think we've still got to educate. There's this great promise, and as we've talked about, it's growing significantly year over year. 27% growth in new advertisers is what we shared yesterday. So we're still, getting folks to the addressable party, and we are differentiated in the sense that we are distributors. We don't have original programming. We don't have the A-list talent to walk the red carpet to come to our upfront brunch. We've got you there for that, and we've got to all tout this capability, right? Again, we're in this same boat. we're all going to benefit from, addressable adoption, addressable budgets. And again, it's kind of, I don't want to call it stealing share, but it's educating the brands on what's possible, right? It's with a cable subscription from any of us, right? It's access to 450 channels, a lot of the great services, the live sports, the things that people care about and are watching. The difference is we kind of aggregate this fragmentation, we put it all together, and oh, by the way, we can apply first party data to it. Isn't this a stickier, better mousetrap than sort of spraying and praying or buying programming and reaching an audience, having waste, doing it on a demo? So I've always said to folks, it's like the best part about selling Spectrum Reach is you're running ads in the programs that people are watching. You're no longer selling a program, hoping people tune in, trying to drive viewership to it, right? Like our channels and our ads are served into homes that are watching ESPN, they're watching Bravo, they're watching Comedy Central, right? They can still choose what content they want to consume. The great part is we've got equitable access to all of that with our first party data applied to it.
And that goes back to this idea that not all ads are created equal. You're talking about kind of comparing that to a lot of the rest of the streaming ecosystem, but on the flip side, it's so much different from the walled gardens who are grading their own homework, and not necessarily providing as much transparency, but because they have such scale, they just hold everybody a bit hostage,
Yeah.
to keep coming back.
Yeah. Um, it's those titles. It's again, I don't know. I mean, some of the subscription services, you asked the question yesterday, we always kind of referred to them as resort towns, right? You'd buzz in for a week, you'd go on the rides, you'd hit the ski slopes, and then you'd come back next winter when the fresh powder hit again, right? It's, um, that
That's a
churn
great
is
analogy.
real, that come in and come out is real, where cable and aggregation is macro serving. It's something for everybody. It's lean in viewing. It's great entertainment programming, live sports, and then yes, probably an element of channel surfing and news consumption. But it's all in one place. I think that's the other thing that's going to come out this year about just the user experience. We've talked a little bit about the discoverability of programs, how hard it is to toggle into one place and out of another place. I hope you bring up the NFL bit of like, how hard is it going to be on a Sunday if you're going into one streaming service to watch the 1 o'clock game, but you want to, flip channels to go watch the other game and it's stuck in another service. It takes you 15 minutes to get there, maybe.
Or behind a paywall. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I was before you got on, we were talking about how literally every single upfront presentation except for one all had the NFL.
Yep.
And how's that a point of differentiation anymore? It's really just now table stakes. You got to pay billions and billions of dollars to get the NFL. Your point is we're agnostic. We have all of the programming,
Yep.
so you can reach all of these consumers across it. You've been in the business a minute.
Yes.
You look younger, I think, than you are. You came from broadcast. Now you're in pay TV. Um, you know, what do you think? Where are we as an industry? Take your Spectrum Reach hat off for a second. And as a player and as a participant and as a community member and as a leader in this industry, where are we and where do you think we're going? Where do you think we'll be 3 upfronts from now?
I think the industry has gone through multiple phases of identity or rediscovery of itself, right? You went D2C with paywalls and no ads, and then all of the ad free stuff for like, hang on a second, the ads thing works. Let's put ads back in. Um, you saw a lot of these platforms look to just aggregate titles and have mass scale and something for everybody. There's now a pivot back to niche, and we want the best and the high quality stuff, and we want to really attract certain audiences to come in and watch certain programs. They tried to all come up with enough stuff to be the one provider that everybody needed. The fact of the matter is no one can do that. The NFL, as you said, is now spread across a lot of things. Great shows are across a variety of networks, as it always was. So you find yourself needing to subscribe to an average of 7, I think is sort of what we read.
Yeah.
That's more expensive
Mm.
than cable. So from my hat and when I came here, it was really bullish on the moment in time of cable and a return to bundling, a return to the utility of services of connectivity, the ability to bring in this video package that does have everything that you're looking for in one place. So I do think we will continue to see the cable model become stronger again. Consumers seeing the value in not just the price points and the access, but the ease of which they can get to what they want to consume quickly and efficiently. So I'm bullish on the paywalls kind of coming down further, the ads coming back into the content, and really, cable in its, I guess, former sense becoming the preferred method of subscription once again to get access to everything you want to consume.
You've been, I mean, Charter, Spectrum, I've been really impressed. You look at what Chris and your team did with Disney a little while ago, basically resetting the market
Yeah.
and dictating the new terms. And now this Cox deal that's coming up, which we won't go into too much detail about, but there is a sense of real leadership at your company in a moment where I feel like sometimes there's an absence of it. And you as a leader in the industry has evolved, your approach to the marketplace as well. If you were talking to somebody who was just entering the industry now and was interested in ad sales, what would the advice be that you would give to them?
Oof. Be patient, be curious, ask a lot of questions. I think it's the only constant. I say this to all the folks on the team is the only constant these days is change. So
Yeah.
what I love about our leadership and what I love about that Disney deal you mentioned happened while I was still at Fox at my old job. And I do remember looking at it, be like, holy cow, right? And it sort of validated like this distribution model, this connection company, even if you cut the cord, hey, you still need internet, right? You still need these services to consume your now a la carte version of a cable bundle. So I'm like, okay, that was just, again, a confirmation of some stuff that we were already sensing or speculating. So things are going to change, right? I don't think I would recommend like a place to start, but it's like get in, start learning, challenge yourself. I had a great boss once who always said, once you're comfortably chewing what you've taken a bite of, take a bigger bite, because it's a massive space and there's a ton of opportunity. Whether you start on the streaming side or the traditional TV side, there's no wrong way to learn the business. And I always admire folks that start on the agency side too, right? You sort of drink out of a fire hose, you get exposed to a lot, you learn about the various services and ad opportunities. So that's always a great place to start if I were to suggest getting in on one side of the business and making a network and making friends. But um, I do love this industry. I love this business, and as much as we talk about machines and algorithms, it still is made up of a great community of people, and it's a fun business to be in.
So it seems like Spectrum gets to have it both ways. You can employ a national footprint and get, hyperlocal. Why does that matter?
We often say like hyperlocal was the first form of addressability, right? When you were targeting a certain community, a certain market, and that still matters, right? We talked about outcomes yesterday, and outside of a handful of big companies that maybe exist in the cloud and can, have goods and packages, ushered to your house, outcomes are oftentimes still driven by folks in a location going to a business, taking an action on the ground. So that hyper localness matters. I think it's the best of both worlds for us to have a national footprint that's sizable across the country that we can do audience addressable. And we've begun to combine both, where we're starting to do local addressable, and we're taking certain markets for certain businesses that exist in the Southeast or on the West Coast, and we're able to do audience targeting and geographic targeting by the makeup of our footprint and our subscriber base. So it is really excellent to, in my honest opinion, be able to serve the two best types of targeting: hyperlocal and first party deterministic audience addressable.
Because there's one thing that is very pro digital is the fact that the medium is open, so to say, or accessible to everyone, and TV doesn't feel like that. So that ability to go local, does that also mean that potentially you can, have small and medium sized businesses investing with you guys?
Oh, absolutely. Small, medium sized businesses, tier three automotive, local grocery stores, tourism boards, hospital, healthcare services. Those are all massive, massive pieces of business for us. And again, it's been fun for me to learn about the local side of our business, lean into that more because there is such a power of being in the community. Our local
Yeah.
sellers in those markets grew up there. They're part of the DNA and the fabric of that community. They know their clients. Relationships there matter as much as they do on the national side. So it's really, really special to um, be a business operator ourselves in those markets.
If you can share, can I ask you if CTV, can they do that too? Or
Yes,
that's like a
absolutely.
major
It's
edge?
we've got a lot of great data, and I don't want to butcher it. What I love is we have this slide that we call only both, right? So it's homes that
Okay.
only have a set-top box, homes that are only streaming, and then homes that do both. The numbers broadly are similar, where it's about 50-50, let's say, linear to streaming. The folks that are streaming are probably 20 to 30%. The folks that have both are another 20, 25, 30%. Linear set-top box, again, depending on the market, is roughly 50%. As you would guess, it changes by geography. There's more set-top
Yeah.
boxes in certain markets, more streaming homes in certain markets, but that directional flow of how the consumer is connecting to Spectrum TV, Spectrum Reach is pretty consistent across the board. So CTV on a hyper-local level is a very real thing.
When we did before you got on, Marion and I were discussing one of the major problems that buyers seem to have right now, which is just an utter lack of uh, um, transparency in the marketplace from the providers, and it feels like you're charging straight at that problem.
100%. I think, whether it's transparency in the data, transparency in the programming, the content by network, day part, selling title. I mean, these are table stakes, right? These brands are making billion-dollar decisions with these budgets to show up in these places. And we oftentimes say, like, maybe ask these things of your streaming media, right? Are you live? Are you long form, right? There's those sort of check boxes of premiumness that maybe still is a little bit ambiguous or broad, but you know, transparency into who you're targeting and transparency into what they're watching. As an industry, we've got to hold ourselves to a higher standard. Those are things that we want to pass. I think there still is a little bit of a race to a lowest common denominator of just broad genre, or this type of show. Maybe it's animated, maybe it's comedy. So hey, look, I would push us to all hopefully do better, ask the right questions. But we believe in passing transparency into the content and to the data.
I feel
Cool.
inspired by Dan. Sorry, Dan. We're meeting
Yeah.
right now, but I love it. No, but it's important because I'm listening to you, and this ecosystem we're in more globally, right? Screams fragmentation. And we
Yes.
spoke about why you're doing Go Addressable, how you're working with your competitors, etc. Man, everyone should be doing that. I'm really sick and tired of those wall gardens. They're not serving anyone, right? So short term serving themselves, but no one in the long run. So what you're doing is tough, but hopefully you'll be rewarded, right? So at least you have our votes, right, Evan?
Yes, absolutely.
Those are the two I was going for today. So we're glad we have those two. But thank you.
Cool.
And I'm a subscriber too.
Yes.
Um, well, this is a great conversation. Thanks so much. Thanks so much to Go Addressable for the assignment to chart the addressable universe. It was a lot of fun. I've been saving the periodic table as a design element for the right assignment, and this turned out to be it. But thanks to you guys for being such great partners on this, and you did a great job yesterday at the event. You really recapped the day incredibly well.
Thank you as well. Always fun to see you at events, and appreciate all the work you do on behalf of the industry, but certainly the addressable side of it, continuing to help be our press agent, if we can even call you that. But appreciate it.
Well, I try.
Thank you for
Thanks a lot, Dan.
joining us.
Thank you.
Well, that was a great episode, right, Evan?
Yeah, it was. I mean, Dan's a great guest, but I feel like we, really hit the heart of what is the debate inside
Yeah.
the television advertising economy right now.
It's actually even more complicated than you think, because if you look at it, we've been talking a lot about TV versus digital, and then when we go within TV, you have TV, CTV, addressable TV, but hopefully everyone will be coming out of this episode having learned a ton. And you went Breaking Bad on us with this periodic table. I love it.
Like I said, I've been waiting to do that design for the right assignment, and this turned out to be that. But I also love the idea that that table and this trade organization, Go Addressable, is so focused on data first.
Yeah.
And that to me is the key to success in advertising right now. So thanks so much for coming back from vacation with us on the Media Odyssey podcast. Once again, that is Marion Ranchet, and your newsletter is called what?
Streaming made easy. How about yours, Evan?
Mine is Media War and Peace. You can get it wherever you get, well, actually on Substack. We know where it is. So it's great to see you again. I'm glad we're back together, and I'm glad we're going on a lot of travels together in the coming
I
weeks.
love it. We were on a break, but just for 4 weeks.
Wow, that's a good reference. All right. Well,
See?
thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time on the Media Odyssey podcast.